who saw Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11 knows President Bush was in a second grade classroom that morning in Florida when he was informed about the second strike on the World Trade Center. The first strike he dismissed as a horrible accident, a bad pilot. But with the second one, it was clear America was under an unprecedented terrorist attack. And yet the president simply sat there. Many people have asked why he did not spring into action, assuming his role as commander-in-chief. But the real question, which Michael Moore mentioned in passing, is why the Secret Service did not immediately rush him away to a safe place. Bush's location had been highly publicized, and if the attacks were a complete surprise, executed solely by foreign terrorists, the Secret Service agents would have had no idea how many planes had been hijacked. They would have had to assume that the president himself might be the target of one of the attacks. For all they would have known, a hijacked airliner might have been heading towards them at that very moment, ready to crash into the school and kill the president and everyone else. And yet these agents, who are highly trained to respond instantly in such situations, allowed the president to remain in the classroom another 10 minutes. They then allowed him to remain at the school to give his regularly scheduled TV address to the nation. This behavior makes sense only if the head of the Secret Service detail knew that the planned attacks did not include an attack on the president. And how could they know this for certain unless the attacks were being carried out by people within our own government? Although many more examples could be given, these four are sufficient to suggest that there is no escape from the frightening conclusion that 9/11 was engineered by the Bush administration and its Pentagon. As to why they would do this, at least part of the answer is clear from the way in which they have used 9/11 to advance the American empire. Immediately after 9/11, in fact, members of the Bush administration repeatedly referred to the attacks as an opportunity. In the words of Donald Rumsfeld, an opportunity to refashion the world. Seeing this connection between 9/11 and the American empire can be a stimulus to face up fully to the awful truth about this empire. To be sure, as Chomsky, Falk, and Chalmers-Johnson illustrate, very strong portrayals of American empire imperialism as far from benign can be drawn without any suggestion that the Bush administration arranged 9/11. These portrayals can be drawn from publicly available documents. One such document is the National Security Strategy of the United States of America, published by the Bush administration in September of 2002. David North says, not unfairly, that this document asserts as the guiding policy of the United States the right to use military force against any country it believes to be or believes at some point may become a threat to American interests. No other country in modern history, adds North, has asserted such a sweeping claim to world domination. Another such document, called Vision for 2020, was published in February of 1997 by the U.S. Space Command. The mission statement at the head of this document reads, U.S. Space Command dominating the space dimension of military operations to protect U.S. interests and investments. Nothing about freedom, democracy, and human rights. In the body of the document, in fact, we find this amazingly candid statement. The globalization of the world economy will continue with a widening between haves and have-nots. The point of this statement is that as the domination of the world economy by the United States and its allies increases, the world's poor will get still poorer, making the have-nots hate America all the more. We will need, therefore, the power to keep them in line. The United States can do this, and this is the document's main message, through full spectrum dominance, which will involve merging space superiority with land, sea, and air superiority. Dominance in space will include, the document frankly says, the power to deny others the use of space. By speaking only of the Space Command's effort to develop a missile defense system, the Pentagon and the White House like to suggest that its purpose is purely defensive. But the goal includes weaponizing space so as to give U.S. forces, in the words of a more recent document, a prompt global strike capability, whether nuclear or non-nuclear, that will allow the U.S. to rapidly and accurately strike distant targets. The fact that the U.S. Space Command's program is an aggressive one is announced in the logo of one of its divisions, "In your face from outer space." Simply from these and other documents, taken in conjunction with the actions of the Bush administration and the U.S. military, we can see through the claim that the U.S. project of creating the first truly global empire is a benevolent or even benign enterprise. However, we can fully grasp the extent to which this project is propelled by fanaticism based on a deeply perverted value system only when we realize that the terrorist attacks of 9/11 were orchestrated by our own leaders, and that they did this to provide the justification, the fear, and the funding for the so-called war on terror, which would be used as the pretext for enlarging the empire. I will illustrate this point with one of the most brazen examples of the use of 9/11 to get funding. Shortly before the current Bush administration took office, about a year before, a document entitled "Rebuilding America's Defenses" was published by an organization called the Project for the New American Century, founding members of which included Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, and Donald Rumsfeld. This document focused primarily on getting more tax monies allocated for the technological transformation of the U.S. military, with the centerpiece of this technological transformation being the U.S. Space Command's project to weaponize and thereby control space. Because this transformation of the U.S. military will be very expensive, the document said, it will probably proceed very slowly unless America suffers some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. It is interesting that then on the night of 9/11 itself, President Bush reportedly wrote in his diary, "The Pearl Harbor of the 21st century took place today." In any case, earlier that evening, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld was on message. We might assume he would have been disoriented by the fact that the Pentagon had just, under his watch, suffered an unprecedented attack. Instead, he was ready to use the attacks to obtain more money for the U.S. Space Command.